So there is a game that I have been playing in secret for the past couple weeks, and that is Avowed. Now, this is a game that the first time I played it, I actually really liked. The more I played it, the more my opinion changed. Now, Legendary Drop, someone who we've watched quite a bit, put out a video 12 days ago, so a while ago. So just after the game came out, saying Avowed has to be the biggest cope I have ever seen. And I don't expect this video to do well on the channel whatsoever. But I wanted to talk about Avowed one more time in one way or another, and thank you for wanting to download stuff. I wanted to talk about this, and I didn't know how, and I thought that this video would be a good way. I don't know exactly what he talks about, but we should be able to get all our opinions across and have a nice little discussion about this game, because my opinion has changed greatly about this game. So let's dive in and see what he has to say, and I'll say what I have to say.
They keep trying to trick us into believing something is popular, so then we go out and buy it. I'm getting so sick and tired of watching both game developers and games media gaslighting the audience and themselves rather than just calling things out for what they are. You need to throw up a signal flare when there's an issue, but they want to keep handing out consolation prizes, and then they wonder why studios close down. How do you not recognize that you are exacerbating this issue? Avowed is one of the biggest copes I have ever seen. Game developers and journalists self-congratulate.
So I think it is and isn't. I have a feeling I know where he's going with this, and I'm going to disagree with part of it, but not all of it.
When the numbers and the player sentiment are telling a completely different story. It doesn't make any sense to me. I'm struggling to tell the difference between article and advertisement this week. It's like they want to wish success into existence. That doesn't work. I'm getting Dragon Age the Veilguard deja vu all over again. Look, I
think Avowed is a perfect game that will settle into Game Pass as a game that a lot of people are going to play, but I would love to know the percentage of people that are going to beat it.
I think that Avowed is an objectively bad game.
Noises all over the place.
We're going to end up talking about that, but it's just a fine game.
Yes.
It's an okay game, but okay isn't acceptable from a studio.
There has been so many games already this year that are like 7s out of 10s. I would give Avowed at this point like a 6.5. But there's been so many games that are like a 7, like Yakuza, like these games like this, like I could give like a 7 to like 7.5 out of 10. And there's been a few that have been like 8 to 8.5s, like Monster Hunter or Kingdom Come. That one probably closer to like a 9. But
studio as storied experience,
you see where we're going with this,
or as prestigious as Obsidian.
Yeah,
we should expect more from them. They should expect more from themselves. But the funny thing is that they don't. The industry doesn't want you to expect more. These studios don't want you to expect more. And this studio specifically doesn't expect more from themselves. This is a growing issue in the games industry. It's poisoning the culture of some of these studios because they're not just accepting mediocrity.
They're not learning to make their games better is essentially what he's trying to say here.
They're aiming for it.
Oh.
Not my words, theirs. But before we get into that, a word from today's sponsor, Exit Lag. You know what's worse than getting outplayed? Losing because of lag. Nothing kills a match faster than high ping, packet loss, and random disconnects. That's where Exit Lag
I've never seen one of these that actually works, so if it works, it works.
Comes in. Exit Lag optimizes your connection with AI route optimization, a dynamic stabilizer, and a diagnostic center, ensuring that you get the best connection to over 2,000 games worldwide. It works by finding the fastest, most stable route to game servers,
might actually
reducing
work,
ping and eliminating stuttering so you can focus on actually playing the game instead of fighting your internet.
That's not what these normally do. I know another service that does a similar thing to this, and it basically narrows what servers you can connect to, and those actually do work.
Setting it up is easy. Just download Exit Lag, create an account, pick your game, and activate the best route with a single click. I tested it myself, and before using Exit Lag, my ping was all over the place. After turning it on, stable, smooth, and no more lag spikes. Right now, you can get 50% off an annual plan, so there's no reason to deal with bad connections ever again. And they also offer squad plans, letting you and up to 4 friends optimize your connections together so the entire team can stay lag-free. Get a 3-day free trial using the link or the QR code on screen and experience lag-free gaming yourself. Play with Exit Lag on. Thank you to Exit Lag for sponsoring this video. Avowed has to be one of the strangest launches I've seen in years because when it was first announced, the hype was undeniable. It was positioned as Obsidian's answer to Skyrim, at least by the fans.
This game was also not what I expected at all.
It was a return to first-person RPGs from a studio that's known for one of the best in the genre. But As the
Fallout New
release date
Vegas is what
crept
he's talking
closer,
about, by the way.
something strange happened. The buzz just vanished. Nobody seemed to care about the game anymore. The game barely got
I think this is also because it came out so close to Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and that game
marketed.
is
Conversation
insane.
among players was dead silent, and then by the time it launched, it felt like nobody actually even cared about it. I was still interested. I've enjoyed Grounded, and I loved New Vegas, and while I haven't played Pillars of Eternity, I was excited to see what Obsidian could do with a first-person fantasy
this is also
RPG.
based off of another
I wasn't
story.
expecting Skyrim, but I was expecting something that would at least try to stand alongside it. But as time passed, my optimism faded. The warning signs were all there. Xbox barely promoted the game. The general audience showed no real
By
excitement.
the way, if you want to get excited for a game, check out the recent gameplay from Expedition 33.
And it was set to launch in the same month as Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 and Monster Hunter Wilds. From my perspective, that looks like you're trying to hide the game. And it looks like
True.
that's exactly what happened, because Avowed's $90 early access period peaked at just 13,000 players on Steam. With a full launch hit, that number barely crawled to 17,000 players. The immediate excuses I'm seeing are, but it's on Game Pass, as if that somehow invalidates the reality of what we're seeing.
Not high numbers, and I truly believe that this is a game that everyone shouldn't buy and play on Game Pass.
Steam's concurrent player count doesn't tell the whole story, true, but it does indicate a trend, and if a game is a massive hit on Game Pass, well, it's going to be an even bigger success on Steam. We've already seen plenty of games launch both
Is
on
that
Steam
true?
and Game Pass while pulling huge numbers. Palworld had 15 million copies sold and 10 million players on Game Pass. Over 2 million concurrent players on Steam. Stalker 2, 100,000 concurrent players on Steam, despite also launching on
And these were all games that came out day one on Game Pass.
Game Pass. Starfield, over 300 concurrent
Okay,
players
this is-
on
this
Steam,
is good
even with
points.
day one Game Pass availability. If a game is truly successful, it's successful everywhere.
That's
and
true.
right now,
Okay.
Avowed is not doing well. That's obvious to me, to most players that are paying attention, and to anyone that's looking at the numbers without blinders on, but that's not the narrative that games journalists are pushing right now. Instead, they're trying to manufacture success with articles like, Avowed is already a big hit on Steam,
I've
celebrating
seen
a
so
measly
many of these.
17,000 concurrent players on Steam, as if that's something to brag about. Avowed tops bestsellers list on Steam despite backlash, pretending that the chart placement somehow means anything despite the fact that the competition that's on there are weeks old releases and games that aren't even out yet. Avowed hits impressive Steam chart milestone before its release, hyping up
What milestone?
a meaningless number that's outweighed by a complete lack of long-term engagement. I'm so tired of seeing all this media spin. You're not my GameStop rep trying to sell me a game. You're media outlets that are supposed to be covering industry news. It's the same pathetic gaslighting we saw with Dragon Age the Veilguard, a game that was supposed to have topped the Steam charts and was declared a strong seller despite completely failing to gain any traction with players. Ultimately, even EA acknowledged that it was a failure. But let's be real, Avowed's failure isn't just about the weak sales numbers, it's about how this game got here in the first place. Xbox's marketing for Avowed was non-existent. It felt like it just got dumped onto the market with no fanfare, no build-up, and no attempt to get the players excited or involved.
I think it's because they didn't want to oversell it. Honestly, like now that I've played the whole thing, I think that's...
If you haven't followed the news closely, then you barely even know that Avowed was coming out. But what makes matters even worse is the only real marketing that this
By the way,
game
the way he's playing the game right now is the same way that I played it. I played it as a spell slinger.
has got over the last year, well, it came from the art director torpedoing the game. Instead of trying to build hype for Avowed, the art director Matt Henson took to Blue Sky to rant about Elon Musk and identity politics in
God.
video games. And not only did he make it about himself, he dragged Avowed into it, turning it
You know what sucks though? The art is maybe one of the best parts of this game.
into a political talking point instead of an exciting RPG. This is the first time in months that people were even talking about Avowed, and it was actually because the developer hijacked it for his own personal agenda. I've talked about this before, but this is
And by the
growing
end of this video, I will tell you the things that I think are great and the things that I think are horrible about this game.
problem in the industry. Developers don't seem to understand what they say impacts their games. We live in a world where half the audience is terminally online, and alienating a portion of that audience can completely derail any momentum a game has. This is a leadership issue. You have your key creatives out there, and they feel comfortable using your game as a soapbox for their personal beliefs.
We've seen this over and over and over and over and over and over again, where this essentially happens, where a good game may come out and then all of a sudden it gets all political because someone who's working on one of the games who needs to say, put their opinion in, and they have what game they're working on in their title. And because it's just not professional is what it comes down to. It's not a professional thing to do.
This is telling me two things. You have no control
Isn't
over your
HD?
employees, and you do not care how players perceive your game. When the only notable thing about your game before launch is controversy, you're setting yourself up for failure. The uncomfortable truth that no one in the media wants to talk about or say out loud is that Obsidian and Xbox set themselves up for failure. Not only just allowing one of their developers to hijack their product for personal reasons, but also for a failure to manage expectations and genuinely trying to connect with their audience.
I think it's a tougher line to navigate though than he's leading on here. Like when you really actually think about it. So does that mean if you are working on something in a public space, you can't have any political beliefs as a human being at all? No, it's when it's connected and you are directly connecting it with that thing that you're working on, the company that you work for. And in this case, that is absolutely what happened.
This isn't just marketing and management incompetence. It's a complete breakdown of studio leadership. Now they're paying the price for it. But if you guys really want to know why Avowed isn't selling, let me go ahead and play you guys the game's first trailer.
We have always known
I wonder when this came out.
war.
This is not what the game looks like at all.
It forged our empire,
At all.
turned heroes into queens and kings, and decimated our foes. Now
I haven't seen anything like this. I think I'm an hour away from the end of the game, and I haven't seen anything like this.
our oaths are lost, forsaken. And you must face the monsters our sins have borne. Is an oath worth the weight of a crown?
Pretty damn good trailer.
We were teased a dark, broody, gritty
Yeah,
world,
okay.
a narrator weaving a
I'm glad he said it like that. It was dark.
tale of conflict and high-stakes adventure. Yet years later, Obsidian revealed that the game's actual art direction and story didn't
Completely
really line
different.
up with players' expectations. Instead of a mature, grounded fantasy RPG setting like people had
And
imagined,
then it comes out right next to Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, which is exactly that dark, gritty, realistic medieval
and we
game.
got yet another pink, purple, neon-soaked game using a soft modern art aesthetic that has infected so many games today. Instead of immersive, distinct character designs, we got the same androgynous, feature-muted male and female characters that, well, we just keep seeing audiences reject. Who's lining up for that? Who's getting excited for that? Nobody. And I would bet good money that Dragon Age the Veilguard's disastrous reception probably led a lot of players to be a lot more cautious of Avowed because of how similar these games looked. You know, I hear game developers and journalists whining that players need to respect creative freedom and expression, but where the hell is that creative freedom when all of these games are starting to look the same? Now, of course, developers can change their art.
I'm not gonna lie though, this game does look good. I don't like giving criticism on this one specifically for this game because I do think like the look of this game is actually pretty good and one of the better things about it.
Direction. I'm not saying that they can't. That's not the issue here. The issue is the radio silence for 3 years, followed by a bait and switch reveal that left players confused and disinterested. At that point, people just tuned out. You can't do that, especially not today. And this isn't just an Avowed problem. This is an industry-wide problem. Developers need to engage with their audience. They need to see how players are responding. They need critical feedback early, not just validation from industry insiders and co-workers, especially when they're taking radical shifts in art direction, tone, and atmosphere. Larian Studios' publishing director made a really great point about this. While they didn't mention Avowed specifically, let's be honest, they're talking about Avowed, or at least Dragon Age the Veilguard. But he said, "You can't wait to see if a game resonates with players. It's insane. Why wait and see? It's a strategic play. Build resonance before launch. Set expectations, under promise, over deliver. The latter may sound crazy, but it's far less crazy than saying something didn't resonate in a financial report like that's a surprise. It shouldn't be a surprise. It should be a process." And this is exactly what Xbox and Obsidian didn't do. Developers need to be direct with their vision, be transparent. Imagine how different the reception would have been if Obsidian had communicated these changes earlier, when player feedback actually could have meant something. Instead, they just dropped a trailer that players immediately rejected, downvoted, and yelled at, and then they launched a game to an audience that didn't even want it. Look at the difference in viewership from the initial teaser trailer,
1.8 million views.
1.8 million views, to the actual launch trailer of 99,000 views. What does that tell you? You know, on top of that, imagine how different things would have been if Xbox and Obsidian had held their developers accountable, if they had fired Matt Hansen and disavowed his use of the game as a weapon in a culture war, instead of letting it keep...
I don't think it would have made a difference. I really don't. Like, I don't... Like, I think it comes down to what the game actually is.
Developer drag Avowed into controversy. They had made a clear message that their focus was on the game, not politics. Think about how many players would have rallied behind the game out of respect. How can they not see these easy layups here? You need transparency and you need respect to build trust with your audience.
Sure, that.
Xbox and Obsidian had neither. I don't understand how these companies think that they can continue.
I think this is like digging too deep into like a nothing burger here. I hope he ends up talking about the actual problems with the game and how it plays, as opposed to like the outside stuff. Because I think in general, it is very few people who, like the vast majority, just see a game that looks good, I'm going to play it. They don't know the politics behind it. They don't know what one of the developers did. It's such a minority of the people who are actually playing. I guarantee you, almost all of you who are watching this video never heard about that tweet. I didn't.
To be successful while excluding their audience and remaining silent. Or worse, mocking them and alienating them. The games that resonate, that build a dedicated player base, are the ones that developers are actually engaging with their fans, setting clear expectations, and delivering on their promises. But Obsidian, Xbox, they did none of that. They refused to listen, they refused to market, they refused to control their own people, and now they're learning the hard way that if you ignore your audience, well, your audience is going to ignore you. This might sound like it's coming out of left field, but I think that game developers need to disconnect from politics.
Yeah.
And some people are going to agree with me and be like, yeah, I don't want to hear their opinion. And I get where you're coming from, but what I'm actually saying is that, like, in general, it's just not good for people. Whatever your political...
Dude, I literally said this on stream earlier today. The whole thing that's going on with Canada and the US, I don't care. The people in the US are not like, or the people in the US, they're not the politicians. The people in Canada are not the politicians. Their dick wagging between the two countries is just beyond stupid. It's just like I don't want to see it. And I said on stream today, I wish there was a way I could just block everything with politics on every form of social media that I use, and I can't. It just somehow wiggles its way in there, and I just don't freaking want to see it.
Leaning is. Look at the news cycle given any channel. It's constantly, you're doomed, we're doomed, we're doomed, we're doomed, we're back, we're doomed, we're back. You're going to be spiraling all of the time if you're constantly dialed into that stuff. That's not healthy.
The we're back
and eventually
thing.
You're going to feel like the walls are closing in on you, like the world is on fire. And in some cases, the world is on fire, but what the fuck are you going to do about it? You make video games. So then you start putting it into your video games, your opinions, your beliefs, or the things that you're afraid of, or what you're trying to fight against. And since this industry has a lot of people that share the same opinions, well, all of a sudden, all these games start looking the same, playing the same, sounding the same. They're destroying the relationships with their studios. They're destroying the relationships with their audience. It's just not good for the industry. At least that's my perspective. You're welcome to disagree, but I think it's something that these studios need to route out. Well, I think the controversy had an effect on the game's reception. I think more than anything, it's just the tonal shift and the art change from the first trailer to what the game actually became. Because players came and they were like, oh, I went to the butcher and all they were selling was Wonder Meat. It's just not what players were expecting. It's not what they're excited for. It's not what they're asking for. And I think it's time to realize that Obsidian is not the studio that you think they are. Most people are basing their opinions on Obsidian off of New Vegas or Pillars of Eternity. It's been 7 years since Pillars
what was that other game that they had? Was it called Elder Worlds? That game was pretty good.
of Eternity 2. It's been 15 years
What's
since
Elder Worlds?
Fallout New Vegas.
Do I have the name
Things
wrong?
have changed. Look at their last few games. They're competent, but they're forgettable. Outer Worlds, it had style, but the writing was bad. The world felt static. The RPG mechanics weren't all that good. Grounded was a fine game. Pentiment was a thing. But that's the thing.
He's right.
They aren't failing to live up to their expectations. I think that, they're not failing to live up to their potential. This is their potential. I think that's what this is. They're not aiming to be the studio that made New Vegas or try to make better than New Vegas. They're not.
So the problem is like New Vegas had branching storylines that could change based off of your decision in game. The Avowed isn't that. There's no decisions that you can make that change things. You can do something and then one of your companions like, I didn't like that. And then 5 minutes later, they're like, you're the best person in the world. It's complete opposite of New Vegas.
Not chasing innovation or excellence. They're chasing okay. So if they've lowered their standards that much, why should the players have any higher of expectations? We shouldn't. And they don't want us to. Now, initially, I thought that Avowed was underperforming for the quality it delivers. I've played the game for around 15 hours, and there were a lot of things that I genuinely liked. I think spellcasting feels really good. Combat in general feels really good, which is pretty rare for a first-person RPG. The world is dense rather than expansive, which I actually appreciate.
Yep.
Exploration has its moments, and
I think the exploration is really good. It's one of my favorite things. When I get to a new area and I can just boom, go everywhere and find a bunch of crap, best part of the game.
Performance on day one is pretty solid. On paper, this should be a pretty decent RPG, but the longer you actually play it, the more the game just feels lifeless.
Yes.
Like the world might be dense, but it's not reactive. It's Dragon Age the Veilguard in first person. Exploration is not rewarding. The environments feel static, and you quickly realize that every area just boils down to the same bandit, skeleton.
And there has never been a game where so quickly I skip all of the dialogue. The dialogue is just stroking itself off, being like, look at all the backstory we have. And like, the story's horrible. It's one of the worst stories I've ever played in a game.
Bears and lizards. After a few hours, you just feel stuck in place. There's no real variety, no sense of discovery.
And there's two ways you can draw people into like narrative of a game. You can like leave little hints throughout speaking to people as to like what's going to happen next, where to go, what to find, or you can like actually write a good story. And this has neither of those.
A repetitive loop of looting upgrade materials, collecting coins, and reading dull notebook
Which
entries.
I think is okay.
Let's be honest, nobody's playing an Obsidian game for the combat. People are coming for the writing, the characters, and the depth. Pillars of Eternity.
I play this game for the combat. 100%. That's going to be one of the things that I said about this. The combat is my favorite part of this game, and the story is the worst.
The very foundation of this world was built on that. But Avowed, there's just nothing. No urgency, no emotion, no tension. You crash land on a hostile island with only one other survivor, and you're both acting like it's just another Tuesday.
Yeah,
the world is dangerous, but nobody seems to care. I knew I was in trouble when 3 hours in, I was already starting to skip dialogue.
That's
Modern
exactly
RPGs
what I
have
said.
this obsession with exposition dumping, constantly bombarding the player with highlighted phrases that they don't understand, giving zero context, and then piling more exposition on top of that. Avowed is exhausting in that way. When I found...
Dude, you can click through a conversation for like 3 minutes just clicking through the conversation, not even listening to it. And guess what? You find out nothing in that entire story.
Myself fixating on the characters and the story, I had realized that Avowed is suffering from the same problem that Starfield did. A better RPG launched within the same window, and I just can't accept mediocrity anymore.
Yeah.
If you go to play Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 and then you go play Avowed, the difference is staggering.
Exactly what I did.
In Kingdom Come 2, characters react to you. If you get drunk, Henry is slurring his words.
Now, here's what I would say, though, is for some people, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is going to be too much. There's too much things that change. There are too many little bits and pieces that you have to pay attention to. Like, do you smell? Have you cleaned yourself? Do you have a cut? What are you carrying? Is your weapon out? Have you eaten? Have you slept? Like all of these little different things that become a lot. And I was thinking like Avowed would be like a good game, just a little toned down. And it wasn't. It didn't have the story. It didn't have the depth. It didn't have anything. And it was
wobbling
so
about.
different.
He can barely hold himself together in dialogue scenes. If you commit crimes, townspeople remember you. Guards hunt you down, and the world shifts to your actions. If I pick a lock, I actually pick a lock. If I steal, there are consequences. If I murder an NPC, I'll hang for it.
Yep.
Then I go back to Avowed, and none of that exists. The game just feels dead. Hell, NPCs don't even move around town. They just stand in place. Enemies don't free roam. They stay in static positions. It's just a world in stasis. Gabe Newell had a really good quote in a documentary where he said, if I go up to a wall and shoot it, it feels like it's ignoring me. I'm getting a narcissistic injury when the world is ignoring me. And that's exactly how Avowed feels. It's a game that doesn't respond to you. It ignores you. Now, I don't need every RPG to be Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 or Baldur's Gate 3. I don't think I need that level of reactivity every single time. But when you're charging $90 for early access and $70 for full release, I would at least expect you're trying to reach for it. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, Warhorse Studios, the people that made that game have less funding and less developers. Tell me how it's unfair to compare these two things when Obsidian should be the one that's the unfair comparison to make against Warhorse. The whole game feels front-loaded, like a rushed essay where the first few paragraphs get the most effort, but the rest is just filler. Kai, the One character that you get at the very beginning, he's a pretty solid character, but it's obvious that he was the one that was written first. Everyone else, forgettable.
That's true.
The deeper you go, the more Obsidian just ran out of steam. But come to find out, they didn't run out of steam. This is what they wanted to deliver because they want acceptable work, not exceptional work. And that's how they plan to make their studio last for 100 years, apparently. In an article written by PC Gamer titled, "Obsidian won't chase huge profits or grow aggressively. That's how it's going to last 100 years in the RPG business. Are we serious? Yes." Tyler Wilde writes, "Obsidian's 100-year plan isn't, and I hope this isn't disappointing, a decade-by-decade breakdown of future projects that ends somewhere around Fallout Old Vegas. I'm assuming pre-apocalyptic settings are popular in 2103. It's more of a thought exercise, but Morgan and Birch said that they genuinely want Obsidian to continue beyond their lifespans. Are we serious? Yes." And Morgan said, why not? Nintendo was founded in 1889. One of the pillars of the plan is staying lean and invested, meaning small enough that none of Obsidian's employees feel like a cog in the machine. Morgan and Birch said
here's the thing. Here's the actual problem with Obsidian story writing. And the people are going to disagree with this because of Pillars of Eternity, but I disagree. I think they're horrible at universe building, world building, if you will. Like, they made a beautiful landscape in this world, and I just don't give a crap about it. The reason why Fallout New Vegas was so good is because they already had this world, this story behind Fallout that they could work off of, and then they could build something nice. At least that's what I see.
Recent years, they had considered opening multiple international studios, but they decided to partner with existing studios rather than weakening Obsidian's culture by getting too big. Leanness can also refer to Obsidian's games. It doesn't aim for unprecedented scale or the most advanced graphics, and before greenlighting a game, Birch and the studio spent a lot of time determining how much to invest on a project with the assumption that it will be a mild success, not a smash hit. Now, I'll be honest, on the surface, this sounds like a smart, sustainable approach. It's actually what I've been asking a lot of these studios to do. Stay lean, keep expectations in check, and not sink into the same trap as other studios that are overextending themselves with bloated budgets and impossible sales targets. In an industry where companies are collapsing left and right, Obsidian's strategy makes sense. But then you get to the part where they assume that every game will be a mild success. And that's where everything starts to click into place.
But here's the thing, is it kind of is. Even though the numbers weren't there, they still got their money from Game Pass. Now, I'm sure there's some like incentives behind the scene. And the more people who play their game, the more money they'll get for funding. But still, it's on Game Pass. It's
why Avowed feels so lifeless, because it was never designed to be anything more than good enough. The writing, the world, the
mechanics. But this is exactly what Game Pass doesn't want. Right? Because Netflix, the problem with Netflix is they get in these points where everything that comes out on them that Netflix makes, it just settles into mediocrity. And that's exactly, this feels like a Netflix game.
Mechanics all feel like they were built to be serviceable, not groundbreaking. And you can see that pretty much across the game. Obsidian isn't trying to push boundaries. They aren't trying to make the next great RPG. They're trying to make a functional, decent game that checks enough boxes to be playable, enjoyable, and forgettable. But from my perspective, that's not sustainable. Because here's the thing, if you assume that all of your games are just going to be a mild success, well, that's exactly what they're going to be. That's exactly what your developers are going to aim for.
Strive for.
This isn't just playing it safe, it's embracing mediocrity as a business model. It's one thing to be realistic about your sales projections and expectations, but when you start baking that mentality into your development process, you create games that aren't trying to be great, they're just trying to exist. I want studios to be realistic about their sales projections, but I don't want that to impact how they actually make games, and I think that's what's going on here. Larian Studios' Sven Vinca talked extensively about making sure how to keep enough money in the tank to be able to make your game, how to budget your games appropriately.
In other words, good management.
But at the exact same time, all he's ever talked about is wanting to make the biggest RPG ever and how Baldur's Gate 3 was a stepping stone to that goal. So maybe this strategy keeps Obsidian alive for now. Maybe it helps them avoid layoffs or corporate disasters that we see happening at bigger studios. But what happens when the industry evolves? What happens when players' expectations rise? And when good enough stops being good enough? We've already seen that happen. Look how Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 made Avowed feel like an afterthought. Look how Baldur's Gate 3 made Starfield look obsolete. The bar is rising.
See, the Baldur's Gate 3 comparison I don't think is as good.
And the studios that aren't reaching for it at the very least are going to get left behind. Nobody builds a legacy on mild success. Managing expectations is important, but there's a fine line between smart budgeting and outright surrendering to mediocrity. If you're so focused on avoiding failure that you never take any risks, you never push yourself, you never aim for greatness, then what's the point? And beyond that, how does Xbox feel about mild success? Because let's be real, Obsidian doesn't really have the final say here. Arcane Austin dropped one single flop and now they're gone. Hi-Fi Rush had mild success and Tango Gameworks got wiped off the map. Did Microsoft really acquire Obsidian just for them to be comfortably average? Of course they didn't. How do you think Microsoft shareholders will respond to mild success when it turns into consistent,
especially when you say that in an interview, dude,
underwhelming results? Because here's the reality. Mild success isn't stability. It's a slow death march towards irrelevance. I realize I'm going to have some detractors because some people really like the game. And do you know what? That's great. By the way,
I like parts of it.
Isn't a video smearing the game. This is just a video that is saying, hey, there's obviously a problem here. We need to discuss this because that's how these studios can stick around longer. I doubt that a lot of people want Obsidian to close. I want Obsidian to stick around, but yeah, let's take a minute. Let's think about it. Let's have a thought experiment. We know that they're based in Irvine, California. They have over 300 developers. I'm going to take a wild guess and say they probably spent $100 million making the game.
It's not a bad guess.
Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. I'm probably pretty close, though. We know that they have sold, or at least they've had less than 1/4 of the concurrent players of Dragon Age the Veilguard on Steam. Oof. So Dragon Age the Veilguard sold 1.5 billion copies. So we'll take a wild guess and say they're probably right around about 400,000 copies sold. You take out Steam's 30%. Also think about the fact that it's being played on Game Pass. And you're looking at a game that likely made around $20 million. I don't know how much they subsidize for Game Pass or how long they give these games.
How that works, right?
Until they need to be profitable. But I'm going to take a wild guess and say that's not going to work. And keep in mind, Outer Wilds did sell 5 million copies, but it took them 4 years to get there. And also, at the same time, even though that game was on Game Pass, well, Game Pass wasn't as big then. Xbox hadn't spent $70 billion acquiring Activision Blizzard. Xbox isn't also dealing with the issue that Call of Duty is losing relevance at a wild rate. It is crazy.
What if he's going to do video?
That stuff. I still need to make the video on that.
I can't wait till he does that.
So that's a lot of money they're hemorrhaging over there right now. I just don't see this working in the long run. It's going to be too hard for them to justify if they keep costing them money. Because imagine if you're always aiming for mild success and then you miss. That's not good, man.
Because mild success is still expensive.
I like hearing studios that are trying to be responsible, that are trying to budget themselves the right way. But I think the problem is that sometimes you can get too caught up in that, and then you're not giving your developers the freedom that they need. I should have brought this up, and I just had it pop into my mind right now. And the director of Obsidian was one of the same people that jumped forward and was talking about how Baldur's Gate 3 is an anomaly, way back when they had that big drama, and how, they don't really have a lot of autonomy.
Oh my God, that you can't live up to the standards of the game doing that good. Like, it's so good that no one will ever, like, it's not freaking Wayne Gretzky. And even Wayne Gretzky is going to get his record beat by Alexander Ovechkin. If you don't know hockey, you have zero idea what I just said.
Because they don't have a lot of choice what they can do with their games because of money. And saying that that's why Baldur's Gate 3 succeeded is because they got to put their money in the right places and stuff like that.
No, they did it because of good management.
Which leads me to believe that they don't really have all that much control over their game or over the creative freedom of the games that they're making, which would lead to a lot of issues. That's the conclusion that I'm coming to at the very least. But I still believe, the other thing that I brought up is that studios and their obsessions with politics, especially with some of these folks, especially when it's your artist, it's your art director, that is going to be reflected in your game. And I think that Obsidian is now turning into one of those same studios that is walking down the wrong path, focusing on the wrong things, and not realizing what audiences want today. And you need to recognize that.
If it was that gritty game, take the same game and make it gritty.
Otherwise, you're going to lose them. And right now, Obsidian is losing them. Western studios, man, they just can't get their shit together. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you guys.
Because Western studios get their feeling. They get their panties in a bunch, right? Whereas like the Eastern games right now, it's business. You're going to make a game. It's a business. We're going to make something cool here. I don't care how you feel about anything, like what you're doing, what's going on at home. You're here to work. You're going to make something great. And that is what I think the actual difference is. Like, legitimately. Like, I don't care what your feelings are about the game you're making. This is what you signed up to make. And if you're here, you're getting paid through us. That is what you're making. That's what it should be. At least that's how I see it.